So we have imported our project into IntelliJ. It is time to create our first controller. But first, let's discuss what a controller actually is. So when a user wants to access your application, he does that by entering an URL. For example, mysite.com/example.html. It doesn't necessarily need to end in HTML, it's just for example and for simplicity. After that, Spring Boot does a bit of magic. We'll discuss later on about this box and what it actually does. And after that, the request goes to the controller. This is the main entry point into your business application. Here, the request is already parsed, and we have either our data or our request object, which contains our data. And from there we can go to our services that do the business. We can go to our repositories that communicate with the database, and we can do whatever needs to be done in order to control the business flow of our application. After we have done everything, we can return a response that goes all the way back to the user. So let's create our first controller. We go to our main package and create a new package, and let's name it controllers. And here we create a new Java class. Let's name it test controller. This will be the main entry point in our business application, just as we described. And Spring makes it very easy to create a controller. We have two annotations. We have either at controller or at REST controller. The difference between the two is that REST controller will return a JSON object, while at controller can return an HTML page or an image or any data that we want to. If we actually go into the at REST controller implementation, we'll see that it is actually a response body and a controller. It is just for simplicity and for ease of use that Spring Boot offers us a at REST controller annotation. For this simple example, let's leave it at REST controller. To create an endpoint and to tell Spring that that endpoint gets mapped to our method, we can use @getMapping annotation. For the @getMapping annotation, we'll provide the path, and in this case, let's just have it at test.html. And this way, Spring knows that when a request comes to /test.html, it will go to our method that we'll implement. Let's have it return a string, and the name doesn't really matter. Let's just name it doTest, and we can make the application return a simple string. For example, now this is a test response. If we run the application, we will get an error at the moment. It is currently compiled, and you'll see that the application can't run. This is because it tries to connect to a database. This happens because in our build.grader file, we currently have Postgres and Spring Data JPI imported. Let's eliminate these lines for now. We'll add them later so that our Spring application doesn't require any database for now. And also, let's eliminate Spring security. This way, all our endpoints are public. We didn't go into any Spring security configurations. We'll do that later. And if we have Spring security, its default configuration is that it requires authentication. So please delete, or even better, comment out these lines of code in our dependencies and reload the project. This is done using the icon load Gradle changes. After it finished loading, We can run the application again, and so after it compiles, which is quite fast, we'll see that our application has properly started. If we go to a browser and go to our test.html file, we'll see our response. Now let's make an HTML page and have Spring return that. HTML pages are in our templates folder. I already created a simple one, which has just a title, a header, and a paragraph with some text, nothing fancy. In order to have this return, we need to modify our controller so that instead of @RestController, we have @controller. Now, when we access @/test.html, we can return the HTML page, and ThymeLeaf does that by searching for the template with the name of the string that is being returned. So in this case, we want to return this test.html. So we just type here test.html. Now, if we rerun our application by pressing this button, waiting for compilation, and go back to our browser and refresh our page, we'll see that the title has changed and we have our HTML page exactly as we have it in our code. That's for now related to controllers. We'll go into more details later in the course, where I will show you how to return data from the controller to the HTML page so that we can have dynamic information. For example, we can have here, instead of this is a page, we can have it as this is my first and name. And from the controller, we can just return the name. I will also show you how to accept data from an HTML page form back in the controller and how to properly store and parse it in the database. All this information will be covered in later lessons, so hope I'll see you in the next one.